All right. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, cool. So we got this thing, it's called cystic fibrosis. People have it. It's caused by cell-to-cell communication breakdown.
And a genetic mutation.
And a genetic mutation is so there's like 3 types of cellular communication. There's endocrine, which is organ to organ, which is like trans-organism communication. There's paracrine, which is
it's nearby, like standing here talking is close.
and then there's autocrine, which is cell to itself, or yeah. So there's
3 stages of cell signaling. You have your reception, your transduction, and your response. And cystic fibrosis really gets messed up in the second part of transduction. After you receive your secondary messenger, it then interacts with a misfolded protein to make cystic fibrosis. And it's really interesting how much imbalance and all this, it was a lot of stuff that went wrong just for cystic fibrosis to happen. So first I'm going to talk about the cause. It comes from the cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance receptor. The mutation is there, and that is on chromosome 7. As you see, here's the human karyotype where chromosome 7 is. And this is the actual, it's like smack in the middle of the chromosome. And this is where it's made of proteins, and a protein is misfolded, protein F508, which just means it happens in the 508th place. It's actually phenethylene gets deleted. And so that'll cause for them to have a thick, sticky mucus build up.
on their lungs, like
Yeah.
here's a normal person's lung, and then here's a person with cystic fibrosis. There's like a lot of mucus in the lung, and
You can see it. Obviously,
right.
it's hard to
And
breathe.
in the pancreas, there are things called fibrocysts, which is how it gets its name, cystic fibrosis. That blocks enzyme transport from the pancreas to the small intestines, which the intestines don't get enough fluid, so it doesn't allow bowel movements, which causes constipation.
That's another symptom. Another symptom is, of course, the coughing, frequent lung infections, wheezing, and shortness of breath. And they have salty, tasting skin, which
That's
from the fluoride ions that build up in the cell. And that's one way cystic fibrosis is diagnosed through a sweat test, where they measure they take your sweat and measure the amount of chloride ions in there. So if I could real fast, I'm just going to draw what really goes on. So you have your G protein. We're going to pretend there's a membrane and the adenylyl cyclase and your subunits here, which is your G protein too. And so it's called it's a calcitonin gene-related peptide ligand that binds to the G protein, and then you have your GTP come and activate it and send it to adenylyl cyclase, which makes your secant. Then secant goes to, it activates your protein kinase, which we know breaks off because of the videos we watched. And then further down here, we have our the transmembrane conductance, which is a big protein, and the way it's shaped, it's got a pore on top. And so when this breaks apart, its action is to send an ATP over here and bind. And we have fluoride ions in our body, and like in the cell and outside of the cell. And so the ATP's action is to open the pore so fluoride ions could come in and out, which is a really important balance for us. But when the protein misfolds, that is our genetic mutation where it just messes up, the ATP cannot bind. And so this pore never opens. And so chloride ions build up, and it makes it really, really high concentration. infiltration inside the cell.
That's why it tastes salty.
And so where the mucus comes from is the epithelial cells in the lung, and it happens in the pancreatic ducts, but not so much. The cysts more affect the pancreas. In the lungs, the epithelial cells that make the mucus get dehydrated because the body freaks out and says, oh, we're going to send water to dilute the chloride ions. Well, that makes the mucus really thick and sticky and heavy, and it makes it hard to breathe. We've all had that bad chest cold, and it immobilizes the cilia in the cell so it can't move the debris out of your lungs, which leads to the frequent lung infections. And so that happens in the pancreas too, where Jay said it blocks the enzymes.
Right. Yeah, when you're constipated, and that's not very good. So
And that's about all I've
that's
got.
about all we got.
Thank you.
Thanks. God, we had 6 minutes.
Okay. Got a couple questions for
Alright,
you.
cool questions.
Alright, so
Where's that place?
the mucus, we'll just leave that because I'm gonna ask you a question about it.
Okay.
Alright, so the mucus, it builds up in the lungs,
In the lungs, like
Lungs
your
and-
bronchi and your bronchioles,
okay? And where else do we find that mucus?
That's
in the
Okay, so like your
yeah,
respiratory
respiratory
tract.
system.
the respiratory tract and the digestive, the pancreatic ducts is where it really affects those
Alright,
digestive.
So the mucus is basically a byproduct of like dehydration. So their body is like naturally dehydrating,
Yes.
correct? So when they treat this, what are they trying to stop to happen? Like when they give you medicine for cystic fibrosis?
They're trying to get this even. It's what it's trying to do. It's trying to balance the chloride ions, and it's basically just trying to treat it more too. Just trying to, you do breathing tests to get the mucus out. It's basically trying to treat it and then focus on that.
On the biochemistry part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What is the outcome of somebody who has cystic fibrosis?
Well, they usually die
Well-
early 30s. Well,
With medicine now, it's more 40s.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's a lot of really neat medicines out there now. I know stem cell research and things like that.
inhaler.
Yeah,
That is,
there's an inhaler that has stem cells in it, and they can take that. I know a lot of y'all know Brett Lott. You know, he has CF, and I mean he was diagnosed. Gosh, I think he was just a few months old when he was diagnosed.
so did Zach Stevens in our grade.
Yeah, and he's Brett Lott.
yeah.
And he's only had like 1 or 2 little setbacks. He got polyps, and I know that was one of the side effects. Did you see anything in your research about like what the polyps are all about? Like why do they make that?
I didn't know about the
Yeah. They'll get them like in their nose and in their respiratory passage. And I know that some of y'all are thinking about medical careers, and one place a lot of people don't realize it's there. It's respiratory therapy. Yeah, that's a big field to go into, and someone who has respiratory therapists, they have to work with these people like this because they got to get that mucus up. Okay, lung transplants. Can individuals just get a lung transplant and they're cured from it, or is it something that they'll always have to?
I would think that a lung transplant wouldn't cure it because of the
The
pancreas
genes,
and the intestines that get messed up and how it affects your genes too, but I'm sure that would prolong their life.
right.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about CF?
Okay. You know how in Lorenzo's oil, they just added more oil to his body and it like helped? Would you think since the chlorine is building up inside the cells, if they inserted like chlorine like to the outside of the cells, would that help? Or do you think like
That probably.
I was just wondering if they could just drink a whole lot more water.
Yeah.
Because you're dehydrated.
That's actually a really good point, that since that's the only way the chloride ions go, that might.
So which way is the buildup of the chlorine? Is it build up inside or
built up
outside?